to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
We're most pleased to bring you a two-week series from the Center for New Directions at North Idaho College. That very special center works with women who are changing some things in their life, and they are looking for new directions, and I can testify to the fact that it has been a very successful program, and we'd like to talk to you about that. And it's an example of a program that is also found at other places in the United States as our world is changing, and our economic structure and our social structure. I'm very pleased to welcome to the program to my far left Charlene Huber, who is a student that has gone through that program, and she will testify to some of her own personal experiences as some of the roles in her life has changed. And we're also very fortunate to have on the program today, to my more immediate left, Carol Hodd, who is the director for the Center for New Directions. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And I'm very pleased, as always, to have regular panelists, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney and is a law clerk to the district judge here in Idaho. And I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
Let's begin with you, Carol, and can you tell us, where is the Center for New Directions located, and what is its purpose?
Okay, the Center for New Directions at North Idaho College is located in the Headland Vocational Building, excuse me, on the NIC campus. There are 6 centers, as Tony mentioned, in the state of Idaho, and they're all located in the vocational technical area schools in the state. The purpose of the center is to assist primarily displaced homemakers, and single parents to become personally and economically self-sufficient, is the way the legislation that established the centers puts it. So that gives us a pretty broad mission, but a lot of the things that we do are to help women find their way into the workforce.
What kind of a woman might visit your center? What kind of person might come there?
Well, we have a real wide variety. We have some women who have 4-year degrees and have went through college, and maybe they've been out of the workforce a while and they're trying to learn about the new workforce and how to best make use of those degrees and skills, all the way from women who may be married when they were very young, dropped out of school in the 8th grade, don't have any formal education at all, and didn't even complete high school, and they're starting from there. Most of the women are primarily concerned about survival, economic survival, how they're going to meet the needs for themselves and their families.
What kind of a staff do you have at the Center for New Directions?
Well, our permanent staff is only myself, and I have a half-time secretary. But I have some wonderful people that I've identified in the area that work for us on a consultant or a contract basis. So they're involved with particular projects that they do under certain grant funding. So we actually have about 5 very talented people working for us and working on particular projects.
Do you teach classes then, or do you counsel with people, or do you do a little of both?
We do a little of both. One of the things that we really are proud of in our program is a class that we do called Possibilities, which is a 6-week class where we deal with a lot of the issues that women come in with. We do a lot of career counseling. How do you decide what you would be good at? How do you fit your particular personality into the jobs that are available? Then we work a lot on self-esteem, which is usually a big issue. Communication skills. I have people from the student services here come and talk to them about how do you enroll in college. I'll tell them all about financial aid, which can be a real intimidating process to go through, at least the first time. So we cover all of that in a 6-week period. And if women have the time available and can be part of that class, I think that is really a good thing for them, because they form a nice little support group. They all have some things in common. But we also do work with people individually, and we do offer personal counseling and educational and career counseling.
Charlotte, let's turn to you for a minute. You have been there. How did you find the Center for New Directions, and what led you there, and then what happened after you got there?
Well, I was at a time when my children were grown. I was working part-time, and I wanted to basically start either on a new career or just work on some self-esteem and just sort of learn to get back into life again. I had read several articles in the newspaper and heard about the counseling, which I went in for initially, then Carol suggested the possibilities class, and at the time I had the preconceived concept that I had to be a displaced homemaker, and I said, I'm not that. She said, well, we do have some openings, and I went into the class, and it was just excellent. It had a lot of areas that work on your self-esteem, imaging, what would you like to be if you had no barriers, and all of those things, which just generally, I basically completely changed my whole concept of what I wanted to do, and sort of through their backing and help, I decided to go to college, and which I did, and I've graduated, and now working, and I think I still wish to continue my education. That's still something in the background, but I have found I can do it.
Did you make and keep some friends that you met initially through the center?
Oh, very much so. Interesting enough, those friends, when you go through the same process, I think, with friends, and you have someone to talk about it with that understands, you sort of keep them. And through the years in school, I have developed a very warm friendship with a very good friend who's about the same age as I, and I think that will continue for lifelong.
Carol, I'd like to go back to you and talk about the fact that you mentioned briefly in responding to Janelle's opening question that we have these centers throughout Idaho at the different vocational or technical schools. This came about through state legislation, is that correct?
Well, the centers were established through state legislation.
Right.
I think it was 10 years ago. And it was started with a pilot center in Twin Falls, and then the following year they established 6 that cover, we all have a geographic area, so we cover the entire state. And every state, of course, makes some response to the problem of displaced homemakers and single parents. But how they do that and how they deliver those services varies.
Okay. Because I was going to make the comment that even though Idaho legislature passed the program that we have in this state, it is carried out in other states too through legislation. I want to talk a little bit about the funding for that program. Do you receive state funds and federal funds and some are local funds through the college? I guess the real basic question is, how are you funded?
Well, we're funded primarily by federal funds from the Carl Perkins Vocational Education Act, and I think the new act is going to be called something different, but and it's a set-aside in that federal legislation that every state that receives those funds must use some of those funds to fund programs like ours. So the majority of our funding comes through that. We do receive some funding from the state through a tax that is placed on the divorce filing fee. So our funding breaks down to probably about 85% federal and 15% state.
Mm-hmm. And then the college simply houses it. There's not a lot of money out of the college other than using the facilities.
That's right. But they give us the facilities, and of course we can make use of all the excellent support services that the college offers, which is wonderful, the PR department and all of that.
Yes. I always think of this program as an assistance to those who are watching, and we're always trying to help our audience. Tell us a little bit about the process. I know Charlotte will talk some more about her own experiences, but if the person comes to you and they want to become involved, what is the entire process? And do you have any kind of testing process? Do you have a waiting list? And another part of the question is, what kind of cost is there for the person coming to your program?
Okay, well, I'll deal with this last part first.
Sure.
All our services are free, are offered free of charge. The only exception might be something special above and beyond what we normally do that we might have to charge for because we're paying the person to put it on. But all our basic services are offered free. And the process is really simple. People call in, and usually they come in first and have a one-on-one appointment with me so that we can kind of go over where they are and what they feel that they're needing at this point and do a little assessment. Then, depending on what their needs are, we direct them to one or the other of our programs. Most people I like to see start out in Possibilities, or we have an evening version of that too called New Directions for Men and Women, which is the same program done for both men and women in the evening. And so that's usually their starting point. We do career testing. We do some testing for learning styles. We work really closely with the Learning Assistance Center here at NIC and take advantage of some of the things that they have to offer up there. But it's very simple. We almost never have a waiting list. we run the possibilities class 5 times a year, so it's possible someone might have to wait a little while for the next class to start. But we have not yet been in the position of having to turn anyone away or have them wait very long for service.
I would like to divide my next question into 2 parts. I would like to talk from a few minutes about the substantive work that you do, exactly the kind of programs you have, with one exception. I want to save to program 2 this issue of economic development, the role of women. That next week we'll deal with that. But again, I'm thinking of the viewers who might wish to come into the program, and I know you're so close to the program, it's like some of us in the field, we use certain terms in the audience saying, well, what does that mean? The possibilities class now. Can you just be very specific and tell us, what do you do for individuals in the program, with the exception of the economic development area that we'll talk about next week?
Okay. Well, what we try to do for individuals who come in, Tony, is to first of all assess where they are, what their needs are. Some people feel that they are job ready. They need to know the ins and outs of the Coeur d'Alene job market. Where's a good place for me to apply my skills? How would I get involved in the community? We have some people that come that are new.
Can I interrupt as we go through this process to learn? So if a person has a lot of skills or maybe degrees when they come, you become more like a placement center in that sense, of trying to match their talents with areas in the community you know have needs for those talents?
Well, we give them some advice. We actually don't get involved in direct job placement. We try not to advertise ourselves as a placement service. We don't get jobs called into us, or at least not very often, once in a great while. Usually, we just kind of help people orient to the job market. Coeur d'Alene is a little bit different than the job market, say, from people coming up from California or coming over from Montana. And so we try to help them understand the job market. Who are the biggest employers in the area? What are they hiring? What do they look for? What kinds of jobs? Things like that, more informative. But usually what we're doing is assessing where people are, what they think they would like to do. Some people come in with a very strong idea. I've always wanted to be a nurse. I just need to know, how to do that and how to get the financing to do that. If they have no idea what they want to do, then we start with some career testing. And very often for people who have not completed high school, we try to get them involved as soon as we can with the ABE GED program. But part of their job needs and their educational needs are only part of it. Usually people who come in, particularly if they're in a transition due to a divorce or due to the spouse being disabled, or some condition that's really forcing them to look at this issue where maybe they wouldn't have normally in their life, they usually have a lot of needs in the area of self-confidence and in the area of self-esteem. They are sometimes shaken, sometimes angry, sometimes don't feel good about themselves, are pretty sure that they're not going to have a positive experience if they go to work. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area too. Charlotte talked about, we do some things with imaging, with helping them to imagine a more positive future. What would that look like? How would you like to have your life look? And help them sort of find that kind of direction and confidence.
We've talked about that you do one-on-one counseling and you have classes. Can you kindly for a moment here role play with us and indicate, do you, as you're looking at their dreams and their goals and their possibilities, you kind of do a profile of each person, I assume, and that's from some testing. Am I correct?
Sort of, yeah.
Okay, just kind of take us through how you do that with an individual and then what you can tell them after you have processed it. I'm still a little vague in my mind about what all an individual will find out when they come through that individual process before we get into the class.
Okay, in the individual counseling, well, I guess you would say we sort of form an image of them. But one of the things, I rely more, just my personal style is to rely more on what a person tells me about their life and what they are looking for and what their experiences have been to date than I do on the actual paper and pencil tests. We do some of those too. But I like to get the impression just from what the person tells me. So initially, for most people that come to us, we're really looking at education before job.
Sure.
And so a lot of that is talking to them about getting into school and how they're going to do that. So we give them a lot of information about schooling. We talk to them about just how many people, I had somebody come yesterday and said, I'm going to go to school as a single parent and I want to know how many other people are doing this. And is it possible? And can you tell me something about how that works? But in general, it's trying to take them from where they are to creating a more positive future. We have a lot of different options and programs we can put them into, and once we kind of find out what their interests are and what they see themselves doing, we can give them some direction into that.
Okay. Now let's take them from that scene into the classroom, and tell me how you structure that with the, I suppose there's some group support as they discuss among themselves.
Well, the class, we have we bring in a lot of instructors into that, different people from the NIC campus and from the community. And it's intended to give people just a lot of information about what's available in the community and what's out there. The group support, we spend the first week or week and a half on self-esteem building. And that's the time when we really see the class kind of gel together, when we take a long break purposefully in the middle of the class, and a lot of the good support stuff happens during the break. They find that there are connections with each other. And I personally feel that women, at least in particular, learn better in groups. They like that group support, and they like the idea that I'm not alone in this, that other people are having to do it. And so if one of them takes a step forward, the other one is more likely to step forward as well. I don't know, would you agree with me on that?
I think so. And
Charlotte, why don't you take us through your experience in the class, if you don't mind, and how
It's been a while.
the support system that you create in the classroom itself.
Oh gosh, when I went in, I was sure I was going to be the oldest. I was a grandmother, and you always had that concept before you go to school that no one is as old as you. We had the gamut of ladies that were in their 60s that were going through the same situation as I. Some of them were single, and we had very young girls that had small children. So it was a very mixed group, and that helped me in that regard. I think women tend, when they're in a situation where they have low self-esteem, they tend to isolate themselves, and so the group was able to cohese a little bit by sharing our experiences, those of us that were older, with our remembrances of going through what they went through, and for them to have someone to talk to. I think that has a lot to do with why we were able to work through it. Some were very negative, and some of us were very positive about what we were doing, and some of the people that were positive were able to pull the negative people in, and I think that also is why the group works a lot of times.
Janelle Burke.
Well, I want to follow up just a little bit on this. Can it be done? Can it be done, Charlotte?
I guess I'm a good example that yes, it can.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that. How do you need to think? How do people need to think?
I think people need to really, one of the exercises we did was investigate our belief systems. It's very interesting what we believe, and then to investigate why we believe it. That really brought some information out that was quite fascinating, and a lot of the reasons we don't do things is because we believe that we cannot do it or it cannot be done. And I think when you go to school after, for me it was close to 30 years, I just was sure that I could not do it. And there were times, even through the years that I did go to school, that I didn't think I could do it. But I found that you just keep doing it and keep doing it. And also, as I said, I had an extreme amount of support from instructors, from Carol and the people that I worked with through the center, and that made quite a bit of difference too.
Now, how do you involve your family in this, or whatever happens to be your support group? Because for some people who may be single, they may not have a large support group, but other people may have children at home or someone, parents, someone who is supporting them. How do you involve them, too, in your decision-making and in your experience?
Well, as I said, my children were grown, and I'm a grandmother, and they were very positive. They thought this was wonderful. It also is sort of a good example for my daughters. The one daughter was in college at one time and did quit, and she decided that she'd like to go back again. She still hasn't done it, but she knows that the possibility is there, and she knows that she can do it. And I think if I gave them a gift for my children, is to know that you can do something. Whatever you really want to do, you can do it, you know. And
is there a possibility of spreading yourself too thin?
Oh, very much so. For a while there, I was working 2 jobs and going to school full time, and I was working 7 days a week. Totally, you just almost get where you're focused, and you get a little bit strained. But fortunately, there's a whole bunch of us out there in the same vein, so we were able to talk it out. Or else, if we had a real stressful time, to work it out. So.
Because I would imagine that among those people who visit the Center for New Directions, many of them do have multiple responsibilities and multiple kinds of decision-making roles that they have to play. And so it would seem to me that there is that possibility of how do you stay focused on what you really want to accomplish. And I suppose the center helps you deal with some of that. Is that correct?
Oh, very much so. I think that's where the counseling helps too in that regard. You can go in and talk to them, say, this is what's going on with me. And I admire the younger girls. I have a very large admiration for the ones that have small children, the ones that have husbands that sometimes feel very threatened by the change that they're going through. I greatly admire those women. I really enjoy talking with them.
Carol, do you do anything to include, like, let's say, husbands who, to help them to become more supportive of their wives' desires to get out and form a new career?
Well, when we started the night class, which we call New Directions for Men and Women, we started it primarily because the women in our classes were saying, I want, my husband to hear some of this. I want my boyfriend to come in and have some of this same. So we do offer that, and quite often some of the partners and husbands do decide to go through that program just so that they can get on maybe the same wavelength, learn what their wives are learning, and learn by that to be more, not necessarily more supportive, but more directed themselves, and to see the value of those things.
Have you had anyone say that as a result of your program, a husband took advantage of what was a new direction for a wife? In other words, that husbands learned, because men are making changes too today, not always staying with the same career, or maybe they retire early and want to try something new. And that's one of the wonderful things about our society today, is that there are more options. Do you hear anyone saying that they've taken advantage of it in that way?
Well, we've heard some people that say that when they found out what was available at the college, their husband decided to come down and investigate. And maybe he would go back to school as well. And we have a lot of course, couples that go to school here, husbands and wives and mothers and daughters, and I think it's kind of interesting, the number of family people. And we've also had a lot of people go through our classes together, mothers and daughters and sisters and different groups like that, so that's kind of fun. One of the things that I wanted to say about what Charlotte was saying, you ask her, how do people need to think to get through this? And I think one of the things that always impressed me about Charlotte and a lot of the other women who've been very successful in the program was that they simply didn't lose sight of where they wanted to be, and they did what was necessary to get there, and they didn't they didn't lose patience with that. It can be a very tiring long process for some of them. And the idea of stretching yourself too thin, sometimes they really have to stretch themselves too thin in order to survive. And I, with Charlotte, have a tremendous amount of admiration for those that are raising children and being the sole support of the family and going to school. That's amazing to me. But we have women who do it all the time.
What would you say is the average age of the woman who comes to the center? And are more of them single than married? Probably so, I would guess.
More of them are single, and I think our average age, the last time we checked, was somewhere our average age was somewhere late 20s, early 30s. But we have people all the way from the late teenage years all the way up, as Charlotte said, into their 60s. We ran a special program last year we called our Young Moms program for young parenting out-of-school women in ages 16 to 21. And that was a real gratifying program, and we had a lot of success with that. The gals had a lot of success.
Now, I should ask you one more question that probably I should have asked near the beginning of the program, but who oversees you? Who do you report to? What are you a part of?
Well, at NIC, we're a part of Student Services.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in the state office, we're still funded by the Division of Vocational Education, the State Division of Vocational Education. And so we also have some responsibilities and write our grants and send our final reports to there. So we kind of have two bosses, but we're part of Student Services at the college.
Also, I know that Charlotte was speaking to the question that there were times when it was difficult and you have so many responsibilities, and so I got this mental question about how long is the program? Does it vary from person to person, or do they all go through a certain specific amount of time?
No, it varies from person to person. We have some people who just come in once. They get their needs met at that time, and those are people that mostly just need some information about getting into school or need information about the ABE, GED, or whatever. And there are some people who take advantage. We put out a newsletter about 4 or 5 times a year, and with different classes, other than the basic things we do some special event things and some one-day workshops and things. So some people come back for years and years and take advantage of those things. We keep an active file on our participants from the time they come in until the next 30th of June, and that's when we begin doing our follow-up for our success data or whatever for our final report. So they're in our system, that long. But as much as what they take advantage of at the center varies a lot.
I've had a lot of reports from your center from friends that I know, and I would say publicly that it's great praise for your center and that you've done an outstanding job. One member of this community told me she didn't know what she would have done without your center, that you were that much help to her to put her life back together in a rather tragic situation she was in. But based upon the fact that you have lots of people with different backgrounds, we're just about out of time, but I really want to ask the question, what is the most challenging kind of problem that you get? Is it opposition from other family members? What do you dread most about a problem that you would have to address?
I have to think about that. One of the things that I dread most, in the sense that I do feel rather helpless about it, is the woman who comes in. We're seeing more of this, unfortunately. The woman who comes in, she's going to be evicted in 3 days. She needs a job immediately. She has no saleable job skills that we can identify that would get her beyond minimum wage. There are some problems that they just seem too multifaceted to deal with, and that we're not set up to deal with all those kinds of problems, and I feel kind of inadequate sometimes when I can't provide those kinds of instant solutions.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. We're out of time, but we will be back next week, and with our viewers we will discuss this topic. We're going to look at economic development and the role of women in the economic picture. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our program. We invite you to be with us when we continue this subject next week. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time. Welcome to today's broadcast of North Idaho College Public Forum. The crew is comprised of NIC television students, and your moderator is North Idaho College political scientist Tony Stewart.
Welcome to our second week of our program with the Center for New Directions at North Idaho College. And last week, Carol Haught and another one of our guests was able to explain to us what all goes on at that center, and it was a very, very informative program, and we're pleased to be back again this week to deal with one particular aspect of the work of that center. We're going to discuss the issue of economic development and what is happening not only in Idaho but across the country, and some of the problems that we face in economic development as the role of women has not been adequate to that process in areas such as pay. We have 3 people on the program that are certainly qualified to address that issue with us today. To my far left is Bobby Richards, who is with the Panhandle Area Council and has worked closely with the North Idaho College Center for New Directions in relation to the issue that we'll discuss today. Next to her is Sarah Looms, who is a consultant with the center and has had her own business and has a lot of experience that she can share with our viewers that will be most helpful, and we're happy to have back this week also the director of the Center for New Directions, Carol Hott. Welcome to all three of you.
Thank you.
And I'm very pleased to have back a regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who is an attorney and a law clerk to a district judge in Idaho, and I shall ask Janelle to commence the questioning.
In order to set the stage for our discussion of economic development, I would like to ask a little bit about the history or what goes into this whole subject of economic development. For example, I know that women have come into the job market in much greater numbers, and their training has been in professions more than it was. At one time, women were sort of pigeonholed into certain areas. Bobby, would you like to start by maybe saying a couple of things that you see from a historical perspective that has brought us to the point that we are now in discussing economic development?
Well, you're absolutely right that women are in many areas that they didn't used to be in. Women are going into fields that have classically been male job markets. Sometimes that's to the betterment of the women, but maybe not to the betterment of the whole job market as a whole, because those wages tend to go down when women get involved in a certain field. That's an unfortunate byproduct, probably, and we hope that doesn't continue. Women are moving into professional areas that they haven't been before. They're also going into things like mining and welding that they haven't been in before.
So that's really one of the changes that we're seeing in the economic picture, is that women are moving into different directions. Sarah, do you have something else to add, a way that historically things are beginning to move along so that we can begin to talk about the economic development issue?
Well, I know that in Idaho in particular, because we're talking about our region in the conference, that 48% of Idaho women work full-time and many others part-time. But by the year 2000 and increasing during the 1990s, it's expected 80% will be working full-time with an additional as part-time. So it's no longer a time when we can afford not to have women in the job market.
They're going to be there. It's just a question of how we treat them.
Yes, it's happening.
And Carol, do you have something to add from a historical perspective that you think is critical to the issue of economic development?
Well, one of the things that when we're talking about economic development, I think we're talking about not only, Sarah brought out the number of women that are going to be entering the workforce, and what we hear about all the time now is Workforce 2000 and what that's going to look like, and that the majority of the entrants into that workforce are going to be women and minorities. The new entrants, not the majority of the workforce, but the majority of the new people. And they're going to be needed. In other words, we're at an era where we're going to need all the people who are able to work, and that era may last 20 years or longer before we have another ready influx of young people into the workforce. And the positive thing about that is that some of the supports that haven't been there for women, the community supports, it will begin to be part of community development goals to get those supports in place. And we're talking about the daycare and the elder care and those kinds of things that women really need to be able to enter the workforce in a successful way. So going beyond where we are now, the hope is that we're going to be able to merge these two agendas. The things that women have been saying they needed, it will now become important for the private sector to begin looking at providing. At least that's our hope.
As we deal with this issue, Sarah brought this to my mind, and I will ask this question of her. In Idaho, I think we're still statistically lower than the rest of the country when you indicate that 48% are in the full-time workforce, but around the country it's even larger. But you're indicating here it'll be up to 80% in the near future, really, when we look at the end of this century. It's close by. The thought that comes to mind to me is that as women and men share equally the financial burden of the family by both working full-time, we have not decided in our culture yet that men and women share equally in the responsibility at the close of the day, both in the responsibility of the care of the children or even preparing them for education or doing the work when we come home. When is this going to change, or how can women continue? And I'm in a very serious note here that women are really having the burdens of two major jobs. What's going to happen with this?
Well, with education, Tony, most women are ready for this to change and would like someone to help carry the burden. What I share with the Possibilities class is that when women enter the workforce full-time again, they contribute 8 hours a day or more at work, and the housework they're still doing about 80-some%. So that what they often negotiate time with is less sleep.
Or when they have very young children that are at a care center, and when they come home at 5 or 6, whatever that may be, they have the intensive responsibility of taking care of that small child at night too. I'm really what I'm trying to get at too is, since you're all very involved and experts, what is this doing to both the physical health and the psychological stress on women? It seems to me we'd reach a point where there's some kind of very serious reaction to that if we men do not take more of a responsibility with that job after 5 o'clock.
I think that's why we also emphasize assertiveness so much, because there's nothing wrong with saying, I'm contributing on the workforce, but I need help. I am not able to do everything and do it 100% well. And when you are heard, often people are being more supportive and more aware. But we want it to change within women themselves, saying, we're active, we're participating, but we also could use some help.
Carol, are you seeing that in your center too? Is that one of the factors that's leading to really dysfunctional families or oftentimes divorce?
Well, I think it can certainly put a big strain on the family. But one of the, but it is a two-sided problem, as Sarah said. I mean, women need to be able to ask for the help. And hopefully, but when they do ask and the response is not there, I mean, it is not, their partner is not willing to comply with that, it certainly puts a lot of strain on that relationship and on that family. Most women are not, once entering the workforce, we do see some women, or I have read about women that will back off and say, okay, maybe I better go back home, and there's a little bit of that going on now. But most women who've entered the workforce are not going to go back. And most families now need those two incomes. So I think it's a matter of women continuing to push for their rights in that area, and men educating themselves about the necessity to do that, maybe.
Bobby, I have a question for you. These programs were triggered by an article that I read concerning your work together as a group in economic development, and you indicated that as economic development taken place, that an equal role for women had not taken place. Would you elaborate upon that and explain what some of the problems are in the workforce?
Well, our workshop was meant, and by the time this airs, I guess it will be over, was meant to identify the issues in public policy and private policy that could be changed to better support women in the areas that you've been talking about. The areas of child care, housing, women in credit. We had an interesting speaker come from Missoula, Montana, who was going to talk about a new model for credit for women, access to credit. Economic development and women are involved in economic development all the time. Most of them don't really know that they are. But when they go out and they support a business, or they don't support a business, they're involved in economic development. When they have a job or they have a business of their own, they're involved in economic development. And it's sometimes economic development has been seen as a bucket that is filtered from the top. The Jim Community Program with the Department of Commerce does this, a bucket that you filtered from the top with wages and profits and things like that. And the leakage goes out the bottom when there's not the things in the community, the services and products in the community that keep the money in the community. Women have a big role in that, in using that money within the community. But that's just a very small aspect of it. The other aspect is they support things, looking at things like child care and housing as real infrastructure needs. Infrastructure is not just being sewer and water and roads that support a business, but all these other things are needed to support a business.
Janelle Burke.
Before the program, you were talking about some statistics, and so I'd like to go back and ask each one of you, perhaps, if you have some statistics or something along that line, so we can talk about economic development from that point. Let's start with Bobby.
Well, the one that I was mentioning before the program was one I got from Coralie Myers at SBA in Spokane this morning, and that was that U.S. House of Representatives report said that by the year 2000, 50% of the businesses in the United States would be owned by women. Now, she said, I don't know that this is going to translate to 50% of the business in North Idaho or in even the Northwest, but that's a large percentage, up from like 31% in 1987.
That is pretty phenomenal. And what's that going to mean? Do you think those are going to be small businesses? And do you think it means that women are going to be more astute in terms of their shopping and in terms of their running their businesses as well?
Well, there's a lot of things that will happen. One thing is that women won't have the time to shop, to go out and do shopping. I think we'll see a lot more catalog buying. And that's just a small thing on the consumer side. A lot of businesses that women start more. I can't remember what that figure is about how many small businesses are started by women. It's a much larger percentage, twice the percentage that men start businesses. Most of those are small. Some of them are home-based. I would suppose.
But it's a very big and important impact on development.
Yes. Small businesses create a huge amount of the number of jobs that are created every year in the United States are created by small businesses with under 10 or 15 employees even.
Sarah, how about you? Do you have a statistic for us something that you've read recently that is of importance as we look at economic development in the future?
Well, I know that from about 1986 until end of 1988, early figures 1989, the per capita income in Idaho has stayed about $11,100, which is much lower than the federal average, the standard.
And what that basically tells us is that there is some need for education, there is some need for help, there is some need for jobs opening up, the kinds of jobs that will make more money. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I would conclude from that. Now, what other kinds of impacts do you think that figure has for us?
It affects all of us economically because we want to attract businesses to the area, and yet what businesses consumers need people to work at a certain pay ratio, need schools of a certain quality, and so growth and job development will feel the ramifications of, can you make a living in the state of Idaho? And as a woman, am I encouraged to go elsewhere? Because right next door in Washington, it's quite a bit different across, the state line. And I know that's true in the teaching field, so it very much carries over into many fields.
And Carol, do you have something that you would share with us, perhaps? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a statistic, but some thought
trying
along
to think
that.
of numbers.
some thought along that line that shows us how important, really, women are to economic development.
Well, to talking about how important women are to economic development, what I was thinking about, or what I'm trying to think about, is the situation when we talked about the small businesses coming into the area. And women starting small businesses, which is a real healthy sign, but it often has a downside for employees. What we have now in our area, in North Idaho, we have our large employers still, but we have a lot of small employers who are looking at their bottom line and not real comfortable. And so they're creating a lot of part-time and temporary and no-benefit jobs. And we did, in doing our research, on this issue, we ran across something that talked about a primary job market and a secondary job market, and the primary job market being the large employers in the area. They hire mostly males. They're, looking at the kind of stable jobs. Women often go into the secondary job market, which are small companies just getting started, and for their own, to help their bottom line, they create these jobs that really do not provide the security that women need. Jobs with benefits are just, someone finds a job with good benefits, it's like finding gold or something. I mean, it is, and women need those kinds of things in there. So there's a good side of the small business area, and then there's the side that if you're an employee of a small business, sometimes that's difficult.
Now, I want to throw out just one kind of phrase, and that is that so often when women become involved in a job market, then the total salary declines, or that traditionally what we've thought of as women's jobs were less well-paying than, quote, men's jobs. Do you all want to answer at once, or do each one of you want to take a crack at that one? How about starting with Bobby? That's
well, I think that's been classically true.
And how are we going to change that?
Well, you know, I look at
for the good of everyone.
I look at the whole job market though in North Idaho, and I see men working for $4.50 an hour too. I don't know that women's position in Idaho may be worse than it is other ways, because men's position is also worse. So it's a whole thing that needs to come up. It's not. Remember the old saying with Reagan and the boat that went up with the level of the water. All our boats need to go up.
That's why I said for the good of everyone,
Yeah.
because it is a societal problem, not just a male-female problem necessarily, although of course it often translates that way.
And you still do run into well, it's just a woman's job, what's the difference? You know?
One of the complications that we have in our society that goes beyond gender, and that has to do that we have gone through a transition economically from rather heavy industries such as the steel industry, the automobile industry, mining, all those paid really well. And we've gone to a service industry as we've lost a lot of our markets and in the world trade. And there's up and down to all things, and as the world economy's improved around the world and other countries have advanced, we're having to compete in a very different way. And the service industry doesn't pay men or women like the heavy industry did. Do you see that as something that we have to tackle too? Or and as women have entered the marketplace more and more, from Sarah's statistics she gave, they've come in at a time when there's more of those type of jobs than if they could have routed in at a time when they were better paying jobs. Am I correct that there's two problems here as I see it? One is a gender problem still yet, and the second one is the kind of economy we're developing. Sarah, would you like to respond?
Yes, well, I know that it is usually the service industry that women fall into, and traditionally they're the lowest paying jobs. They're minimum wage, usually. And there are men in those areas also. But for women, the economic impact is that they also bring baggage with them in the form of dependents and young children who could use the benefits, terrifically. That's one thing that we run into in our program, Possibilities, is that's a blockage that we need to work through, to break through that barrier, because it often keeps people dependent on the government system. And others will say, well, why don't they get off of the government system? But it's a very frightening time for women when they do become self-sufficient enough to work, but not enough to work beyond poverty. And there are a lot of people doing poverty-level jobs. And
I have another question for you, Sarah, because since you've had an experience with your own business, could you share with our audience some of the obstacles or roadblocks women face in starting a business that a man doesn't? We still have the problems and stereotypes of like credit. Could you share with us some of those problems?
it almost stems from a confidence-based self-esteem place where you feel confident and competent to go to a banker, to go to institutions, landlords, etc., and present yourself as a feasible, competent, intelligent woman able to run a business and turn it profitable. And there are many challenges set up, just blockages that keep you from taking the first few initial steps. And I think that's why cottage-based businesses are going to be so big in the next 10 years.
But don't you find that when you get there to make that presentation, that there's some barriers to overcome in attitudes that men may not face?
Yes, there are. That's why we're looking for more role models as women in leadership. We need to see it being done by women in banking, women in credit. Support groups or groups that feature women as entrepreneurs. I found a lot of encouragement, but I had to find it the hard way through seeking out women also in business.
Carol, I know back to the Center for New Directions, I assume that in your work that you also, when you were talking last week about self-esteem and all, that you deal with some of these specifics too with your clients, do you not?
No, we work with that a lot. We haven't worked at the center so much in recent years with women going into their own small businesses. That's something that through doing the workshop that we did recently and working with more closely with Panhandle Area Council and some other places in town that we hope to get more involved with. We've been involved more with the idea of having women get access to the training and opportunities to take advantage of existing jobs in the community. But we do run into women who want to start their own small business. They have a wonderful skill or idea for doing that, and it will be good to get involved in being more directly involved in being supportive to that, because that is a very viable option for women to make it in the world.
Janelle Berg.
I have a two-pronged question. I'm going to start with Bobby and ask her, why is credit so important? And then I want to move on to Sarah and ask her about daycare, both for children, child care, and elder care. So let's start with Bobby in terms of the credit. Why is credit so important? Why did you include that as part of your conference?
One of the big barriers when anybody starts a business is they're usually underfunded, they're undercapitalized. It's particularly important for women because they have less access to credit usually. One of the things that they have identified as a real problem for women is that they need smaller amounts of money. Many women need enough money to buy a sewing machine and a little bit of leather to make purses, maybe in their home or in the garage. But they don't have a credit history. They may not have a relationship with their banker, and they can't borrow $2,500 or $5,000. SBA, loans a lot larger sum. The banks say, if you can't, you should be able to put that on your Visa card. Well, these women may not have a Visa card, or maybe maxed out for food. So they don't have access to those small amounts of credit that are really important. The WEDGO, the group in Montana, in fact, I've got to tell you, there's an interesting thing on television not too long ago. It was, and it's WEDGO in Montana, and the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, and Chicago Experience, which is 3 models of basically the same kind of credit program for women that loans small amounts of money to women entrepreneurs, and then monitors them very closely and asks them to really stay in touch. Let us know when you run into problems, help them out. WEDGO's Experience has been not a single default in almost a year and a half that they've been doing it. Bangladesh and Chicago's is longer, and it's even more successful.
That's great. Sarah, can you tell us about daycare? Why is that so important to the economic picture?
It's important to all facets of the economic picture. We're hoping that employers will become aware, because they're saying that we can't attract quality employees. We keep having these problems with losing help, changing staff, and retraining. Often it's because of the daycare and elder care situation. And to find good quality daycare that is stable and of quality, where you feel safe about leaving your children, is one of the major blocks that keep women from progressing in the workforce. They often get hired and are extremely excited, but it's very difficult to say to your employer, when the men don't leave to take the nauseous child home, that you have to do that again. So with education, we hope it will become more clear that this is a nurturing role women are normally placed with, and that's often what happens when the parents come home again. So we need to have quality.
I would like to get you to react to something that was proposed nationally and was not successful. The Congress was proposing that there be a leave time for both women and men when a new baby has come into the family. And so many industrial countries of the West have done that, and it's not been successful here yet. The President opposed that particular program. Isn't this something that's also affecting the workforce in a very, very significant way from both the woman and man's viewpoint in that family?
Absolutely. I mean, it has to. If you can only leave, if you know you've got 6 weeks that you can be off work and you have a baby and then you have to go back to work, that's pressure. that's really stressful pressure.
Not only is that stressful prior to the birth and right after the birth for the woman, and maybe she and her husband both, but secondly, don't we lose a lot of top quality people in the marketplace? They simply say, I'm just going to give it up if I can't have more time than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure they do.
And Sarah, is that what you're talking about, part of the retraining that takes place because you're continually losing, and pregnancies don't always come at the time that you expect them and so forth.
No.
So.
And it's why women are postponing having children till later. They're hoping economically to get on their feet. When they start to get on their feet economically, they find out that my years are numbered to have my children, and it's very risky to step out of the job market and step back in. Things change.
We're running out of time, but I guess we can summarize by saying that although there's been very significant progress in some areas, we have some very, very serious problems to look at if we're going to solve some of the both economic issues and what is happening to the quality of life of the family. I thank all the three of you for being here, and I thank Janelle for fine questions. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've enjoyed our program in this 2-week series that we are concluding. We want to thank Carol Hott and her staff from the Center for New Directions at North Idaho College. I'd like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time, and we'll discuss a different subject, and a subject that we also believe that will be of interest to you. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
North Idaho College Public Forum can be seen at the same time each week over this station. This production was videotaped earlier by an NIC student crew for viewing at this more appropriate time.